Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to my Game of Thrones Season 7 finale review. So I'm yet to find out what the general opinion on the finale is, but I try my best not to get influenced by the opinions of others as I work on any videos of mine. So once you're done watching, let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments down below. But let's talk my initial verdict before I go into an in-depth review of the final episode. I think it was really good, minimally flawed, and extremely well done. I'm kind of a little bit disappointed with one aspect of the episode, but I'm gonna get to that right at the end of this video. But let's get going, because that was a long episode, and this in return is gonna be a lengthy review. Number 1. Let's start with the top moment of the episode. I've got 4 words to start with here. Night King, Dragon, Wall, and Invasion. Now this one was really kind of easy to predict was gonna happen, him using the dragon to either melt the wall or fly right over it. And some fans were really upset and unhappy with how he was given a dragon on last week's episode, one that he would probably use to fly into Westeros, possibly melting the wall on his way in. But I hear those arguments, and I stop for a moment to pose a very important question. What do you guys think the endgame here was? Because dragons or not, they were getting through and they were wreaking havoc on that side of the wall. And yes, it was kind of obvious. Yes, the 6th episode felt rushed, and yes, I thought and still think that pace was okay when I think of it from the perspective of they better rush now than rush with the 8th season and all the way to the very end. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of the bigger picture here, and the fact that for whatever business reasons, we're getting a certain number of episodes, and we've got to live with it. But that scene was just epic, and I barely use that word to describe something unless I'm playing World of Warcraft, which actually kind of reminds me, all this dragon stuff this season, including this scene, reminds me of World of Warcraft's Nightwing and all those little frostworm dragons in Icecrown Citadel. Now when I used the words Ice Dragon last week, a lot of people raged and tried to educate me on the fact that it is an undead fire dragon. However though, that did not look like fire to me, or at least not your regular color of fire. So let's just call it frost or frostfire for now. Just another fancy word for ice. Now the fact that the Night King could ride and command the dragon kind of makes you wonder who the Night King is. And while the most dominant theory out there happens to be all about him being a Stark, I say he's most probably a Targaryen. But moving on to number 2. That 1 minute of absolute silence at the very beginning of the episode was absolutely amazing. Felt like a total callback to the finale of Season 6. That entire first scene as well, with the Unsullied right outside King's Landing as the Lannisters prepare for any surprises, even though pretty worried about the outcomes, was pretty good. Now I definitely stopped counting after the 3rd time the word cock and its variations were used in that conversation between Bran and Jaime, but they were definitely a lot. But then there was the arrival of the Dothraki, and I gotta say, the entrance they make has always hit me as pretty strong and pretty magnificent. Just those screams and yells they go for should be capable of instilling fear in the hearts of the mightiest of Lannisters. And that they did. But speaking of arrivals, I think it was a pretty terrible choice of Dany's to come with her 2 dragons. She brought the entirety of her armies along, and that's a show of power, so choosing to come with the 2 dragons gives away that she's lost one. And Cersei does pick up on that, prompting her that they definitely have their own weak spots. But then again, Dany always makes an amazing entrance with those dragons, so the hell with Cersei. I love though how she arrives with a delay as well. She makes the entrance of a real queen, like she's telling Cersei who's boss. Maybe without guards, but definitely magnificent. She didn't even need to introduce herself, because the frickin' dragon was introduction enough. But moving on to number 3, the conversation between Brienne and the Hound about Arya was amazing. It's interesting as well how the Hound finally admits he cares about Arya, that he was trying to protect her during their not-so-fun adventures. I mean, back then we could tell that he was, but for the Hound to admit it out loud is pretty good. It's just that the way his character has been developed over the course of so many seasons is worthy of admiration of the writing for both him and his lines. But I also liked how both him and Brienne admit to how powerful Arya has become, how the only person who needs protection is whoever stands in her way. That definitely felt like total projection towards what happened later on with Littlefinger. But moving on to number 4. Enter the Dragon Pit, which looks a whole lot more amazing than it did on the episode trailer, as you get to see it as the camera moves around the place. But there's also the way everyone is scouting the scene, checking out every wall, every crack, and every entrance. It just went to show how Cersei chose the perfect place to purge them all, if she wanted to. But the Hound's performance and lines didn't cease to amaze me on that scene either. It was just so much fun watching the banter and the comebacks going back and forth between him and Tyrion. I left this shit city because I didn't want to die in it. Am I gonna die in this shit city? And then there was, seems every bad idea has some Lannister cunt behind it, to which Tyrion responded, and some Clegane cunt to help them see it through. Now say what you may about how bad or good Tyrion's character is written this season, but in the end Peter Dinklage will always manage to put awesome into the character no matter how badly it's written. I do personally believe though Cersei's choice of the Dragon Pit was on purpose, possibly to send Dany a message. The Dragon Pit used to pretty much act as Targaryen dragon parking. It just kind of felt like Cersei's way of telling Dany something around the lines of, your ancestors are gone and their dragons are gone, and both you and your dragons will be gone one day, but I'll stay on top and I will prevail. But let's move on to number 5. The Hound walking in with that big box of undead, the whole scene, that was even a better show than I expected. And it felt good to see Cersei scared like there is no tomorrow of that undead soldier. That was one hell of a demonstration as well, with every single part of that soldier moving, no matter how many pieces you cut him into. But moving on to number 6, there's a lot more to discuss about this conference of 2 queens and a king. But for starters, you've got to admire Jon Snow and his inability to lie as a politician. The world would definitely be a better place if we were to have a handful of politicians like him. I did love a lot of his one-liners and short statements throughout the entire sequence in King's Landing. They were clear, plain, and simple. If we do not win this fight, then that is the fate of every person in the world. There's only one war that matters, the Great War, and it is here. I'm not gonna swear an oath I can't uphold. When enough people make false promises, words stop meaning anything. I mean, a whole bunch of that could count as stupid, very unpolitical, but totally worthy of respect. Jon Snow might be king in the north, but he's not cut for the treacheries and the bullshit of the job. And this is what distinguishes him from the rest of the herd. But moving on to number 7. Loved Jaime's, I suppose we should say, goodbye, one idiot to another. The relationship between Tyrion and Jaime has always been great. The conversation that followed though between Cersei and Tyrion was totally worth the watch. Cersei actually seemingly human for a moment, finally showing sadness over the death of Tommen. That was kind of a change worth watching. Surprisingly enough though, she's not willing to give an order to the Mountain to kill Tyrion, which you would have expected her to do in a heartbeat. Lena Headey just went as well for 50 shades of awesome acting in this scene. From cruelty and blame to caring to selfish to her lack of drinking and the moment she touched her belly, alerting Tyrion to the fact that she's pregnant. But moving on to number 8, I expected Cersei to actually ruin the whole situation for good and not offer help at all, and I expected her to do it to their faces. So my first reaction when she allegedly offered to help was like, what's going on there? Why is she planning to help? It's totally unlike Cersei. But instead of doing what I predicted and expected and just refusing to help to their faces, she proved to be the total bitch she's always been. And with that, she pushed Jaime further away. She bowed the support of the Golden Company, mercenaries in Essos to fight for her, and the seeming betrayal of Euron turning his back on her was nothing but a ploy. So Euron is not really such a jackass after all. Well, he kind of is, but not when it comes to Cersei. But then the moment I was waiting for was there as well. She pushed Jaime away. I mean, my prediction was basically that by the end of the episode he would be angry with her and unhappy with her decisions. But while Jaime has been a lot of bad things over the course of 7 seasons, it seems not keeping his word is not one of them, and so he walks out on her. So maybe, after all, Jaime is destined to become a hero, and possibly the slayer of yet another mad ruler. I'd really love to be right on that one. But moving on to number 9. I became the 3-eyed raven. I don't know what that means. That definitely cracked me up as part of the conversation opener between Sam Tarly and Bran. Loved as well him asking Bran if he saw Jon and Daenerys coming to Winterfell in his vision, only to have Bran show him the message they received from Jon Snow. That cracked me up as well. Tarly has been a total comic relief this season. The wedding vision as well was pretty good. Seems like either Robert didn't know Rhaegar and Lyanna were married, or he was just angry and vindictive. And of course we finally have a name. Jon Snow is Aegon Targaryen. I have one question though. Was Bran by any chance watching them have both sex as he talked over that scene? Or was it just bad timing to have him continue talking about that in the worst moment possible? But anyway, I guess Jon Snow will be finding out who he is next season, as opposed to me believing this whole conversation was going to happen differently, in his presence at least. But moving on to number 10, Jon Snow and his conversation with Theon was one of the moments I've been waiting for since the very beginning of the season, at least since they met for the first time this season. I think it was overdue, especially with this whole Theon redemption arc they have been toying with for a while now. But well, the speech Theon gave about Yara owning up to being a coward in the past was inspiring, but you never kick a man with no balls where his balls used to be. That didn't seem like an effective strategy right there. But moving on to number 11. Littlefinger making one last play when it comes to Sansa, trying to convince her to unname Jon as the king in the north, seemingly poisoning her even more than she already is towards Arya. That was a pretty amazing final battle of wits for the man. And Sansa, she finally proved she's grown, finally became the smart woman in the room and in action. And for all the comments that I've gotten on this topic last week, apparently I was right. Sansa and Arya seem to have been in agreement for a while now, and they were just playing Littlefinger. And while we were all asking about Bran was in the background as I assumed, getting them all ready for this moment. For the moment they have Littlefinger pay for his crimes. These Starks have finally gotten some justice for the harm that has been brought upon them for so long. I did as well love the mention of him holding a knife to Ned Stark's neck and telling him he warned him not to trust him. It just felt like poetic justice right there, and it felt very satisfying to see him die by the very same dagger he tried to use in Bran's manipulation earlier this season, the cat's paw dagger. It was also good watching the two sisters go down memory lane as they remember their father close to the very end of the episode. But on another note, when Arya said that she had to become something else, I was actually waiting for her to continue with someone else, followed by the Arrow theme music. I really have no freaking clue how I ended up distracted and thinking of such things while watching such an amazing series. But moving on to number 12. While a lot of people have been excited for the entire week since episode 6 for the boat sex, some viewers were actually very skeptical about it. I could even go to say they were totally against it. The reasoning I've read and heard was all about it being predictable and in some cases identified as a terrible plot twist. But when you kind of think about it, the show did lay down the groundwork towards this moment. Most of this season, Jon Snow spent his time in Dragonstone for one thing. Another thing is something we were reminded of on the penultimate episode by Daenerys herself. In her conversation with Tyrion on said episode, she was discussing all these heroes who jump right into danger, and when you listen closely to the list of names, you will realize she's already fallen in love with two of them, that being Daario and Drogo. So if there's nothing else to support the twist, I'm guessing the fact that Daenerys is attracted to a certain kind of men, that she has a type, is enough for now. But there were actually other defining moments when it comes to Daenerys and Jon, two major ones if you ask me. The fact that he refused to bend the knee, yeah, he didn't seem like the power-hungry type, probably had a positive effect on her. If you go back and watch all those scenes that they had together while he refused to bend the knee, there was definitely a certain level of admiration on her end. But the second defining moment happened right around the time when she returned from battle, and Jon, in a manner of speaking, befriended her dragon. Daenerys loves those dragons, and the fact that one of them was totally fine with Jon definitely got her attention, definitely got her looking at him in this new light. Her lack of knowledge he's a Targaryen, coupled with her dragon being totally fine with the guy, is definitely something that would inspire Dany's trust in Jon Snow and expand on her admiration for him. But on yet another note, the expression on Tyrion's face realizing both sex was happening begs a few questions. Is he in love with Daenerys? Is he in love with Jon Snow? Or does he possibly know the truth about Jon Snow? But moving on to number 13. Still on boat sex here, only now I'm questioning whether or not Daenerys could have kids of her own. We possibly had two Easter eggs on episode 6 towards her possibly being able to bear children. The first was all about the succession conversation she had with Tyrion, which she ended abruptly and didn't want to discuss further. Daenerys there could have been holding on to the last shred of hope the curse that has been put on her seasons ago could be broken. Now the second Easter egg does not really involve Daenerys, but rather involves Jorah and Jon. When Jon tried to pass Jorah the sword, the latter pretty much tells him he should pass it on to his children. And we all know Jorah has been noticing Jon and Dany had a thing for one another, and he knows Dany can bear children. Wishful thinking, I suppose. But besides both of those though, there was just too much Daenerys pregnancy talk. But on the finale, there was as well the conversation she had with Jon in King's Landing. That conversation ended up with Jon telling her that the woman who put the curse on her might not have been a credible source of information. That's yet another hint. But the heart of the matter here is, I think Dany getting pregnant would totally fit in with the whole history repeats itself concept that I've been expressing a whole lot of fondness of over the past videos. Dany and Jon have a baby, let's say Ned Targaryen, only for them to end up dead, just like Rhaegar and Lyanna, and the wheel goes around again. And yes, I've already named their baby. Now I've been reading a whole bunch of theories online on the topic, and I have one of my own, so I'll be digging into that further on a video I'll be posting sometime this week. But moving on to number 14. Now over this past week, there's been this one question that I've read repeatedly, once in the comments to one of my videos and a whole bunch of times when looking for Game of Thrones news. Will the Hound and the Mountain get into a brawl of sorts? I think my prediction of that happening was probably influenced by that question from the comments and me repeatedly seeing it all over the internet. Unfortunately, that prediction of mine didn't come to be true, which actually makes me wonder why someone claimed my predictions were based on leaks when I made it clear leaks weren't of any interest to me. Even better, 2 out of the 5 predictions I made were wrong. I'll never understand how people's logic on the internet works. But yeah, this is my disappointment. I would have thought we'd at least have a longer Clegane brothers moment there. But instead it was all about those few words the Hound said, and it was done and over with right then and there. Now I know I might have missed parts here and there on this review, but I don't really want to go for a 2-hour review for this episode. But after I go for a second watch of the finale, I'm probably gonna come back with more, shorter videos though. But for the time being, let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode, how you think this is all going to play out on Season 8. And no spoilers please from any scripts that have been allegedly leaked, or your comments will be instantly deleted. But do let me know as well if you think Dany will get pregnant, and if you believe I'm right, and history would repeat itself as we go further ahead. And finally share with me and everyone what your favorite moment of the finale was. And as usual, remember to slap this video a much appreciated like if you like the content I had to present here, and while you're at it, you can always subscribe and enable notifications as well. But until I see you next time, thank you all for watching and have a perfect day.